So when it comes to initiating a major program like the types that you're working on, what are some of the key elements that can really set the project up for long-term success?
The way we approach initiation is we would like to dedicate at the front end of the program sufficient time such that the program is set up for success. You're going through the vision, goals, and objectives for the program. How is it aligned with the stakeholder ecosystem that I was talking about? How is the owner, the client?
When it comes to delivering complex infrastructure, the difference between a project and a program isn't just size, it's strategy. Major programs involve many moving parts, long timelines, and a wide range of stakeholders. Success hinges on one thing: getting things started the right way. As our guest puts it, the early decisions made during program initiation can make or break the entire effort. In this episode, we're joined by Rohith Motvani, CCM PMP Program Initiation Lead at Jacobs in the Americas East region. He shares what it really takes to deliver high-impact infrastructure programs, from setting the foundation for success to maintaining alignment across the project lifecycle. We'll explore how he approaches stakeholder engagement, leverages technology to streamline project delivery, and adapts to evolving models like public-private partnerships. If you're ready to elevate your approach from managing projects to leading programs, this conversation is packed with insight you won't want to miss. I'm your co-host, Anthony Fasano.
And I'm your co-host, Fiona Johan, and this is the AEC Project Management Podcast. Let's jump right in.
All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the show for today. Rohith Motvani is a PMP, Program Initiation Lead at Jacobs in the Americas East region. Rohith, welcome to the AEC Project Management Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Anthony. Great to be here.
So I'd love for you to start off by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, kind of what has your career journey been like and what brought you to your current role at Jacobs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, I'm Rohit Motvani. I live in Jersey City with my wife. I've been working in the New York area, been based here for over 10 years now, and really working on global infrastructure projects with Jacobs as a part of our PMCM and global program management business. My background is in civil engineering, so I went to Carnegie Mellon University and really started working at Jacobs right after school. And my first program was one of the largest rail infrastructure projects in the US and one of the largest globally. So that gave me a really good foundation for large programs, mega projects, and I got interested in that field, and I've ever since been on a number of our large programs around the world, and have had a great time working on those.
That's great. So it sounds like you worked on a lot of large-scale infrastructure programs all over the world, like you just said. So can you tell me what some of the most challenging and also rewarding aspects of delivering such major programs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great question, Fiona. And it actually kind of, the challenge leads to the rewards, because when you look at some of these large, complex mega projects, the complexity in those is multidimensional. So you might have management complexity, technical complexity, political, the stakeholder environment is quite complex. And you're really operating in an ecosystem where you're managing many things together, and it's quite an involved strategy to get them right. And that's what I really have enjoyed in this business. And I've had the privilege of working and learning from some of the best people in the business. And one of my favorite quotes is, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulder of giants. And I think in the business, I've certainly learned from some people who are great at this, and that's been extremely rewarding.
Rohith, we know that in project management, like initiating a project is so critical to the long-term success of a project. So when it comes to initiating a major program like the types that you're working on, what are some of the key elements that can really set the project up for long-term success?
Yeah, absolutely, Anthony. And I think that's one of the aspects that's often overlooked in large programs because all of us are extremely interested in seeing shovels in the ground and action in the field. And we want to rush through planning, and that's where the most benefit lies. And um, the way we approach initiation is we would like to dedicate at the front end of the program sufficient time such that the program is set up for success. And in that phase, you're going through the vision, goals, and objectives for the program. How is it aligned with the stakeholder ecosystem that I was talking about? How is the owner, the client organization aligned with the supply chain that's involved and the project management organization, the plans and processes and the policies that govern the program? Is the decision making framework clear? And how are we going to operate as a program team? And then finally, does everyone on the program understand the framework? And doing all of this takes time and takes investment, but it's money worth spending, and it's time worth spending, because that's when you get the most dividends. When you get going efficiently and quickly.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because I think there's a quote that says something like 90% of project management is in the planning, the early on or the planning stages, and it's probably like 95 to 99% because at the end of the day, if you don't have a really solid project plan, it's going to be very difficult to kind of execute your project in line with your schedule and your budget. And listen, we all know that things are going to change on your projects and you're going to have to adjust to adversity and, supply chain issues. But I think to Rohit's point, at the beginning, you need to look at all that. You need to see how it lays out, right? See how the clients match with the supply chain or the client's schedule matches with other critical path milestones on your project, and ask a few questions like, if this one blows up, what happens? If
Yeah.
this doesn't come through, what happens? If they don't get their funding on time, what happens? Type of thing. And so every project, I mean, even us, we're about to do a large project management development program for a government agency, and they have a very strict timeline of when they want us to start the training, but the problem is they haven't got the agreement signed yet. So, our contingency is like, we gave them the date, but if you're late by a week or two on this date, it's definitely going to impact the start of the program. So we need to start to plan for that happening. So I just think as PMs, we need to really be focused on the initiation and planning stages of your project, because you're setting yourself up by really considering things that can go wrong and taking a look at really like stepping back and looking at the big picture.
Yeah, that's spot on, Anthony. Completely agree. And there's a simple quote, I think it's by Abe Lincoln. He said, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first four sharpening the axe. And I think it's so simple, but it's true for everything that we do in our business as well. So I really like that one.
That's a good one. It's just like painting your house. It's all in the prep work.
Yeah, exactly.
You're talking about keeping your stakeholders aligned. What do you do to ensure that you're keeping stakeholders aligned with your project goals from initiation and planning all the way through execution, and especially on these large, complex programs you're working on?
Yeah, that's a great question, Fiona. And what I would say to that is, first of all, the projects, the teams, and the stakeholders need to have clarity on the purpose and vision. Why are we doing what we're doing, right? And it means something for everyone. It means something for project managers on the team, but it also means something a little bit different for uh, residents nearby, or the funders, or perhaps the government agencies involved. So it's important for all of them to be clear on their own role and what they get out of it versus what they can offer. And that shared sense of purpose, clarity, and vision is really what drives such a diverse pool of stakeholders to work in one direction. And if you got a lack of that, everyone's kind of got their own understanding of what they're doing, but it's not a shared understanding. So the way to do that tactically is invest time in chartering, partnering type activity upfront, and invest time in communication, whether that's internal communication or external communication. So a lot of projects will have an outreach team, and that's excellent, absolutely must. I think you also need to have an in-reach team, as I call it. So you look within the program and you know how the program sees the world and vice versa.
That's interesting. I like that last point a lot about just framing it out both as an outreach and internally, because I think we sometimes as PMs we forget that there may be just as much internal communication that we have as there is external, right? Especially in a larger organization like you work for, where there's multi-disciplines, multi-divisions, maybe even multiple offices, locations
Yeah.
involved in a project. So I want to kind of go there a little bit. I mean, I think one of the benefits of working in a large leading organization like Jacobs is that you get to see a lot of different project delivery models on your projects and in your programs. So what role do collaborative delivery models like public-private partnerships play in kind of shaping how you approach, program initiation, your stakeholder management? Just talk about how those models, like what might change for you or how you approach those.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think, Anthony, in the last several years, certainly in the US, there's been the markets moving towards collaborative delivery models, both on the owner side, the project management side, as well as the contractor side. So we all see an uptick in the delivery partner type models or CMAR models, which are more collaborative. And more internationally, it's alliancing. So in the UK, we have some really good examples like London 2012 and Thames Tideway that used a lot of these collaborative principles to deliver programs successfully. So the Olympics opened on time; they were a great success, and you have to do that. And what I see working well with these is transparency of what the risks are and how are we going to manage them, as opposed to the owner saying, I'm just going to push everything down to the supply chain without having a stake into management. And what we're seeing is the better way of doing that is having an honest conversation about who is better positioned to manage what risks, and are we truly able to then work with each other to support the program's goals. And it's that kind of pain gain share mechanism that's working really well, because you've got skin in the game as a stakeholder, and you've got a distribution of risks and incentives that feels a lot more equitable.
That's interesting. And yeah, and I think it's important if you're a PM out there in the industry today, I think it really kind of is helpful and beneficial for you in your career to learn about these different delivery models, because I think these collaborative delivery models are going to become, more and more prevalent throughout the industry, especially with, if there's economic impacts that might happen, funding impacts. These collaborative models like create a lot of innovative ways to approach complex project situations. So I think we're going to see more of that, and it's interesting to hear a little bit about that. And I'm excited just on this podcast to be able to dig into some of those more. I mean, I feel like we could do a whole podcast on different delivery
Yeah.
models or examples of different projects. I mean, Rohit's worked on some, I think, large projects, but all different kinds of delivery models. And so you've got a lot of different experience in that. So what I want to do now is we start to get close to wrapping up here. A couple last questions. And one question is, if project managers are listening out there and, they've worked mainly on, I would say, smaller projects in their careers, but they want to get into these larger projects, these mega projects. I mean, I believe you worked on the East Side Access mega project. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
That's where I started my career,
right.
actually, on decent
Yeah.
access.
I mean, one of the biggest projects that you'll probably hear about if you're into project management. And so if there are PMs that are out there that want to get onto projects like that, that's like their dream, that's like their aspiration. Just reflecting on your experience on these larger projects, what piece of advice would you give someone who's like, "Hey, I really want to be prepared as a PM, prepare myself to work on larger projects." What would you tell them to do to prepare themselves for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, in some ways, project management of small projects has a lot of parallels with large projects as well, because ultimately the project management fundamentals are not too different. What does change on large projects is, like I was saying before, the complexity and then what it leads to. So when you look at an organization, you have a lot more specialized functions and roles. Typically, you might find a matrix structure. So it's a very different way of operating. And therefore, as project managers, we need to think about and understand where we fit within that framework. And is there a specialization that we more closely align with? It could be controls, it could be commercial management, it could be risk management or construction management. And then you kind of go deep in that. So that's one way of doing it. Or if you're interested in program management, which kind of sits across a bunch of projects you're overseeing, or a set of functions that you're managing, it is a lot cross-cutting, and I quite enjoy that transition between, or the interaction between, packages and the different functions and how they come together and work as an operating model. So I think depending on the interest, you can kind of pick where you want to be and then prepare for that role such that you're successful.
Yeah, I think that's a really great answer because to me, it's kind of like it's simple in a way in that, project management is project management, right? The five process groups, if you get really good at them fundamentally, you can do them on a small project, you can do them on a larger project. But then to your point, on these larger projects or even programs, you can maybe pick a couple of areas in those process groups that you want to get more deeply into, become more of an expert into, and you can kind of dive more into those, and they'll probably be a little bit, more complex in these larger projects. But I do like the message of, learn how to do project management fundamentally really well, right? Scoping projects, scheduling projects, risk management, stakeholder management, because you're going to do that on larger projects. You're just going to do them at like a larger scale and maybe with some more complexities, essentially.
Yeah, yeah,
I think it's
spot
it's
on.
so important to find your niche, but also be well aware of like the global. But then when you find the thing you're good at, you learn more and more about it so you can be the best at it, because that's really how
Yeah,
people are going to grow and enjoy what they're doing.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's exactly right, Fiona. And sorry, I'll just say one more thing, Anthony, on that, which is there is a lot of demand in the market for specializations like risk management, commercial management, controls. There are not enough good people out there. So if you're listening to this and if you feel like that's of interest to you, and if you can kind of hone your skills in that direction, in the program management mega project space, there's a lot of demand.
Yeah. And I think that just based on what both of you said there, I think, and I've learned this in my career as well, it's like you need to kind of, in one sense, you need to approach every project the same way in terms of like, pressure wise, stress wise, right? Like remain calm. A project that has a $100,000 budget versus a project that has a $10 million budget. Yes, one's going to be maybe a little bit more stressful in some ways. There's going to be more things you have to deal with, but I think you can't let that affect your approach as a PM, right? You have to
Yeah,
know, listen, I'm really good in my approach. I feel good about how we scope projects, how we price projects, how we schedule projects. I'm going to go in with that same process that I use. Might have to be a little bit different for a larger project, but and I feel like I try to talk about that here at EMI is like we don't want to get kind of caught in the bright lights and get feel a little bit like we don't know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. We're good project managers, right? We just have to kind of be prepared for a little bit of a bigger project. So I think that's an important piece of it too. If you're trying to ramp yourself up to larger projects, and you kind of have to let your background just kick in and bring you into it, and try to remain calm. So the last question that we have for you, Rohit, we call it our PM pitfalls question. What would you say is one of the bigger pitfalls that you see project managers fall into in our industry, and how might they be able to avoid it, minimize it? Just from your experience, what do you see as a pitfall out there that you really got to be careful of it in PM work in our industry, in the AEC industry?
Mhm. Yeah. This is one that can have many answers, but I think I'll give it a go, which is the first thing that comes to mind is, as project managers, we're really leaders in the sense that we're leading a team of teams. And when you look at the cross section of the organization, uh, the dependencies are so high that the leadership qualities of a project manager become very important. And I think sometimes I see many project managers don't fully appreciate or acknowledge that. And I think the way to get better at that is really understanding what is your role as a project manager, and then therefore what can you delegate and depend on others for, such that you don't find yourself getting into the weeds for every single thing, but you're leveraging the collective strength of a big organization that you're leading, or the project team that you're leading. And it's really being clear on that roles and responsibilities bit, versus kind of the tactical bit. Because I feel in the end, for a project manager, it's really important to have a strategic view. And the way I kind of describe it is, a lot of your team needs to drive on the low beam. But as a project manager, you need to be seeing the distance, and you need to see what's 6 months out, or what's 1 year out, and therefore you need to be driving at high beam.
Yeah, that's great. And you won't get a disagreement from Fiona or I on that point. I mean, we do a lot of what we like to tell people is at EMI, we do a lot of people leadership and project management training. But what I say is that you kind of have to do them together, because if you want to manage projects effectively, you need to be able to lead people effectively. And I think one of the biggest kind of misnomers of project management is the fact that the word people is not in the term project management. But as pretty much every day as a project manager, you're dealing with a large number of people internally, externally, the public, stakeholders. So that ability to really be able to interact and lead people and have those leadership qualities is so important. And I would imagine, like we talked about earlier, becomes more important on these larger programs and projects, because there's just probably more people to interact with, or higher level people to interact with in different areas of your projects. And so if you're listening out there, you definitely want to invest in time in your leadership skills, not just your ability to scope and schedule and budget your projects, because project management, and I would say program management, are a lot deeper than that, a lot bigger than that, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely, Anthony. And I'll just build on that. And I feel like it, as the projects and the programs become more complex than before, it's sort of incumbent upon us to keep learning and investing in the future. And I've been really privileged that Jacobs sponsored me to an executive MBA in major infrastructure delivery at University College London. And it's for the last couple of years, I've had an excellent learning experience on what's at the forefront of major program delivery, and how we can prepare better for what's to come. So that's another one that's been an excellent experience. I mean, in any way you can continue to invest in leadership is worth doing, and it might be listening to this podcast.
I hope so. Thanks for that.
Yeah,
I like
yeah,
that.
thanks.
Well, once again, he is Rohit Motvani. He's a CCM, a PMP, a program initiation lead at Jacobs in the Americas East region. And Rohit, we really appreciate the time that you've given us today. We know how busy you are, but this has been really insightful, I think, for our listeners, and we really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
It was great chatting with you. Pleasure to be here, Anthony and Fiona. Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Rohit. Really, really good stuff for someone who wants to go from kind of project manager to program manager and maybe even beyond. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help AEC professionals become better managers and leaders. We'll see you next week.